Welcome to From the Porch. I'm honored today to get to be here with Dennis Goose Geesaman. He just won the Republican primary for our House District 85 here in the Waller County area, and he's at my porch today. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here. So people always ask, how do I get the name Goose in there? And I actually put it on the ballot. So if you voted this last time, you saw Dennis Goose Geesaman, but that's been my nickname ever since I was a kid. Just because my last name's Geesaman, so I've always been Dennis Goose Geesaman. So that worked good in high school. It worked good in the Air Force Academy. It worked good in the Air Force. It worked good. A lot of people didn't even know my first name was Dennis. So my wife calls me Dennis when she's mad at me. But other than that, I'm Goose Geesaman.
Well, thank you for coming. We're just trying to educate voters a little bit this month. It's been lots of politician interviews, so kind of a little bit is like, why did you decide to run for our House District?
I felt like, I'd done time in the military, and then we started a cow-calf and hay operation in Fayette County, and but we had a house in town, and we got involved with a business in town. We started a historic hotel and ran that for 20 years. So for a while, my name wasn't Goose, it was hotel maintenance. And we continued with the cow-calf and hay operation, and then I was on city council. We started the Economic Development Corporation in the town, and I was the mayor for a while. And then after all that, I was ready to retire to the ranch, but I just kept saying in my back of my mind, this just isn't right. I don't feel like we're being represented. And I've always told people when especially the younger folks, talking them into run for office, I've said, if only the fools and the corrupt are willing to run, you will be governed by the fools and the corrupt. And then usually they say, okay, Goose, what do you want me to do? And I said, you need to run for office. So I felt like I needed to step up and do it myself. We tried to beat the bushes and got several people to halfway raise their hand. But then when we started to get into what needed to be done, they lowered their hand. So I said, okay, I'm in.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing that, because I appreciate having more conservative people that will get things done in Austin. I've been fighting there. We talked about some of the issues. The big issues for me, for my running, was property taxes, right? And you found that to be true across the board?
Yes. If I could just make one statement on what I think happened, as I think we made connections with the grassroots, and the grassroots spoke on this case. And it's actually amazing over in Austin how much money I've saw floating around there, and how they circle around the incumbents. I mean, the swamp is really there. It's just like there's a swamp in D.C., there's a swamp in Austin. And I saw that they really circled around the incumbents, and the incumbents tend to lose contact with the grassroots. So I ran this campaign getting plugged into the grassroots with basically every church picnic I could go to, every men's coffee group I could find, every fire department fundraiser, every Republican Party meeting I could go to, and then I just started really making a connection there way back last May, June of 25. And so I think the incumbent didn't see it coming. Because I was making the connections at the grassroots until he did his first poll back in December, and he says, holy cow, this Goose guy might be ahead. And that's when it went ugly negative. But on knocking on doors, the two things that really stuck out, and I've probably knocked between me and my campaign manager, Charles, he's the donkey pulling the wagon. We probably knocked on 5,000 doors, and we hired somebody else, some other guys to help out, and probably knocked on another 6,000 doors. So we knocked a lot of doors. And the two things that really came out on top were property taxes, and what really flared up in the last couple of months was the Islam issue, how it's really trying to get a toehold in Texas, or a foothold, or a strong handhold in Texas.
Yeah, and they're definitely spreading from Houston out this way. We already have a cemetery that is completely Muslim. So they're moving this direction. So we appreciate that help too, coming this way.
So on property taxes, I've actually talked to some folks that said, hey, based on property taxes and insurance rates, we're going to have to probably sell our house here and not own property anymore. And that's kind of scary, because one of the basis for the liberty and stuff in Texas and in the United States is owning property. And so that's kind of scary. Folks at the top end feeling like they got to get out of owning property. But it's the other thing you don't see as much, as it's also a barrier to people entering, the younger generation entering and buying property, if we have high property taxes and if we have high insurance rates and just the cost. They don't see an ability to get in and achieve the American dream. We're in trouble.
Yeah. And
But
they've been promising for years to cut and do, and it's been very small amounts and small gestures. So I'm hoping maybe you can pair up with some people this next term and get some bills pushed through. I'm going to be in there at Austin knocking on your door too.
Okay. And that's one thing where I was surprised on election night when the governor called me to congratulate me. I said to him, well, there's some things I know that we can work on right away, and property taxes, because he had already put out a plan for property taxes, which generally I like. And Lieutenant Governor Patrick also has his plan for taking care of property taxes, and it's got some good points on it too. So I was surprised. About a week later, I saw that Governor Abbott said that Dennis Geesaman endorses the property tax plan. I said, wow, I didn't even think anybody really cared. I'm not officially elected yet, but
I saw that.
Anyway, so I think at least getting property taxes down to zero for the homestead is doable, very doable, even in one session. Now, going beyond that, we're going to have to look at things, but I think it's very doable with using the governor's plan and the momentum that's already there from the other sessions. Not just taking property tax exemptions bigger, which kind of deals with compression, they call it, but actually putting limits on appraisals, and then using the amount that's already going in for exemptions, which is about $51 billion a year, using that along with the surplus that they have to basically just eliminate maintenance and operations out of the ISDs, or put that under put that into the budget. The budget could easily cover that if they just take what they're already putting in for property tax exemptions and what they've already had as surpluses the last few years. They could easily get at least the property tax for the homestead down to zero.
Yeah, there's a lot of smart plans out there by a lot of smart men doing the math. So we will continue that quest. Is there any other areas that you see as concern?
I hear a lot of smaller issues. I've always figured, since I had the old established form their wagon around the incumbent and going against me, I figured that they're probably just going to give me an office at the end of the hall with no windows and say, shut up.
They will.
But to some extent, if I can work my way into a couple of committees, the committees I'd like to get on would be Agriculture Committee, just because I've done farm and ranch stuff, and this district is a very rural district. I was just talking to one guy that's running for one of the other districts in Harris County, and there are 24 Republican districts just in Harris County, and whereas out here I have one district that covers 6 counties. So it's quite a difference in perspective on things. But so I would like to, if I could, get on the Agriculture Committee. I've always been interested in transportation issues, like getting rid of toll roads. That would be a thing I'd love to do. And there's lots of small things, big things. The immigration issue, the Trump and the federal government has put a total clamp down on immigration, but there's still other things that need to be done, like some at the federal level, but some stuff at the local level that could be done was e-verify, having people verify whether they're citizens or not, requirement for that electronic verification. So I could see that some improvements there.
Okay, cool. Well, I think the listeners would love to hear a little bit more of just who you are. I saw some horses, though, in some of your photos. So you have some horses?
They're pretty much lawn ornaments now. That we used to ride, but now we have 4 paints and 1 thoroughbred that are rescues, and they're kind of friends. They decorate the property.
Yeah. Well, I was always just kind of, some of my perspective as a horse trainer is like, if you can train a horse, maybe you can train some people in Austin to do things. Because, we have some horses that act a little bit more like a mule when you train them. So, you ever dealt with any of that personality?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's where people think that state politics are brutal or federal politics are brutal. But I'll tell you, in running for city council and starting an economic development corporation and running the Chamber of Commerce for some time, and then the mayor, local small town politics can be pretty brutal too. so talk about dealing with mules.
You have to see them at church too.
Yeah,
so sometimes it's
yeah.
even a little harder
Yeah,
being in
and that
a
was
small...
interesting because I was the church council president for 8 years, and during that term we separated from the United Methodist Church and just called ourselves the Methodist Church, because there was too much woke moving into the United Methodist Church.
Yeah, I was going to ask you too a little bit about your faith, because that can be a big part of how you're going to operate in office, right? Integrity, just your heart for loving your neighbor is kind of the premise of my podcast.
Yeah, that's the basic premise that I've always dealt with, is that we are all created in the image of God, and that we have value, agency, and purpose from conception to your last breath, last natural breath, let me say. And so I've operated from that, and to me, that's what American exceptionalism is from the very get-go. When we broke away, so that's why some ways I'm a grumpy old contrarian. People say we're trying to save Western civilization. I say somewhat, yeah, but I think we're trying to save American civilization, because American civilization is different than the old Western European civilization, because a lot of Western Europe is already submitted. Texas is the last redoubt to save American civilization.
I'll say one of the reasons that I was running for commissioner is I got pretty passionate during COVID for federal overreach. So I know there's a lot of areas there's a lot of bills out there that cover federal overreach. Is there any areas or bills you're concerned about?
I think we as in Texas, we ask the federal government to do too much. We just need to take a lot of it here. One of the biggest issues that the governor has is to try to end taxpayer-funded lobbying, for example. And the point there being that the real lobbyists should be your representative. And there's so many things that I feel like the Texas legislature has abdicated their responsibility to the federal government. So the federal government will fill in that gap if you let them. I don't think we should let them fill in that gap. Some of the things that they have to do are ultimately be the guardians of the border. They ultimately need to end the H-1B visa program, which just lets a flood of folks come in from other countries that work in, especially in technical issues, that we have people that are well qualified to do, but they want to bring them in because they'll work for 40% of the pay, right. And they won't open their mouths because they're afraid they'll get deported. So we need to make it available for American workers, and we can do that in Texas without the federal government.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of things to focus on. So we talked about as we have growth, here, and you're going to be having even a lot more constituents to deal with than I would be. How do we stay connected? How are you going to stay connected to the grassroots? How do we stay connected as we grow?
Well, I'll come to things like your back porch, and still go to. I've always made a point of trying to go to the Republican Party meetings in every county, and still hit church picnics. I've got some connections with the coffee klatches. There's this one group that you'd met down in Whataburger in El Campo. I'd go to about twice a month, and they're a good group of guys, and it just shows you what it's really like out in these I say small town. I mean, compared to Flatonia, El Campo is a huge city, but it's still only 12,000 people, compared to the monster of Houston right next door. And so it's this one gentleman there, Pat, and he joined the Army right after World War II, and he was 95 years old. He was still driving and come to still real active, and he was actually in the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and he says, we got to get Goose elected. We got to get Goose elected. So that the connection there was, But then about 2 weeks after the election, I went down and said, where's Pat? And they said, he just passed away last week. And it's just, oh man. But it just shows you that everybody has value, agency, and purpose to your last breath, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I know you've been working hard for this election, so kind of what do you do for fun? Now that it's kind of, you get some time off a little bit here.
It's a lot of family stuff. I have a 1926 Model T, which I keep running and work at it. I'm not a great mechanic, but I try to keep it running and enter into some shows once in a while. And other than that, as far as kids, I've actually adopted 6 kids, and we just took one. Our daughter, we have 2 of our children we adopted live in Germany right now, so we have a good connection with Europe and what's going on in Europe right now.
Oh wow!
And we just took the daughter back to the airport this afternoon, and she's flying back. Lufthansa has a nonstop flight out of Austin to Frankfurt now, so
nice.
So I put her on the airplane. But as far as service, I served 20 years. My wife was a veteran too. She served in the Air Force. And then my one daughter joined the Air Force. She was enlisted and is an officer. And then my other daughter married an Air Force pilot. And I've got 2 grandsons that are flying F-16s right now.
Wow.
And
that is a flying family.
Yeah, they can't say what they're doing and where they're going, but at least one of them could be delivering packages in the Middle East right now. So,
oh, wow.
So we'll see.
Nice. Well, I appreciate your willingness to serve. I know this was a hard journey to get here, but hopefully we will be able to get out the vote in November. So y'all vote for Dennis Goose Geesaman. And please share this podcast with your friends. And what are all the counties that we need to be sharing this in?
Fayette, Colorado, Austin, Wharton, Waller, and about a quarter of Fort Bend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Partial Fort Bend. So
it actually goes all the way over. Covers a little bit of Sugar Land. It kind of does a half a donut around Richmond, Rosenberg. Doesn't include that, but it goes over and covers the western edge of Sugar Land even.
Yeah. So y'all have more information now, so just make sure you will get out the vote for us in November. And for me, in May 26th, Shannon Buckleback, please be voting for me for commissioner. Share with your friends. Thanks.